As we've been talking about neuroplasticity, a lot of you might get this thought that it's actually not that complicated. In fact, neuroplasticity is complicated, and it's been a subject of research for years now. And as I said before, there's still a lot about neuroplasticity that we don't know. That's exactly why we decided to talk about some basics and fundamentals of neuroplasticity that you might not be aware of or that other people might just dismiss. We want to dive deeply into neuroplasticity and the plastic mind to ensure that you understand every single aspect of it before you start applying the principles that you're learning. And first off, we're going to talk about environment. Now, we did talk about the environment before, but now we want to expand more into this concept. Socio-cultural factors. The air we breathe and air pollution. We have water quality, food quality, industrial chemicals and alcohol, lifestyle, and of course, a genetics interaction with the environment. And these are all some of the most important factors that affect the health of people. In the early stages of life, from conception through adolescence, adverse environmental elements can have negative consequences on brain development of young people. And even furthermore, when you're an adult, having certain environmental issues can also cause a lot of brain problems. Unfortunately, air pollution, water quality, and food, industrial chemicals are some things that we just can't control. Some people live in countries where there's high levels of pollution, and this will affect them in a negative way. Some people live in countries or cities where pollution levels are low, and they will of course have better functioning when it comes to brain energy and overall health. I'm not going to go into depth into what pollution is doing to the world, and especially to us as human beings. But if you're interested about this subject, go check it out on Google and just look at how much pollution is affecting us, especially affecting our bodies and our brains. It is crazy. And adding to that, genetics, being born with a certain formula that nothing can change unless there is a genetic mutation, which is a really rare case that we're not going to talk about right now. We already talked about Charles Darwin for a bit. I think it's enough. Now, the socio-cultural factors are things that, in fact, we can control, but most of us don't want to, or to an extent, we can't. The idea here is to understand that environments is one of the most essential contributors when it comes to neuroplasticity. Socio-cultural factors can create an environment of pressure, stress, and anxiety, depression, inequality, injustice, unethical behaviors, and of course, consistency makes out of different factors, habits, lifestyles, and they become wired in the brain. So most people look at sociocultural factors as something that is external, when in fact it is highly, highly internal. Everything that's happening in your socio-cultural circle can reflect in your own brain and in your own behavior. I have a friend who lived in China for 18, 19 years, and he was eating Asian food, and he's used to the Asian cuisine. And then he came to Canada, and he just couldn't stand the food. He would feel disgusted when he eats certain foods that we have in Canada, and then he would get upset because he couldn't get any Asian food. He would get upset because his reward system and having this comfort of eating and feeling like you're done eating is not there, because his mind is so wired with a certain cuisine that he finds it hard to adapt to a new diet or new food. And I have another friend from Lebanon, the Middle East, who had absolutely no sense of awareness towards mental health issues. Now, what happened here is that he met a lot of people who talked about their problems, about depression, about anxiety, about social anxiety, or chronic stress. And he didn't deal with the situation from an empathy standpoint, trying to help the other people. In fact, he took a standpoint where he said, You can control the situation. You're doing this to yourself. Like, stop being the B word. I'm not sure if we can use it on Udemy or not, but you guys know what I'm talking about. And of course, people got offended and people talked shit about him, like he has absolutely no empathy, has no heart, when in fact, he wasn't even aware that what he's doing was wrong because of the social cultural influence on him. So unless you understand that when you say neuroplasticity, you say society and you say environment, you are missing out on one of the most important chunk pieces of information when it comes to neuroplasticity. Now, moving on, something that we mentioned in previous lectures, which is experiences. Now, socio and cultural situations usually involves experiences, and a lot of them. But we need to talk more in depth about experiences because the brain gets wired through experiences first. So before talking about consistency and talking about all the different techniques that would strengthen this connection and link between neurons, we should understand how the link is formed in the first place. And the way the link is established is through experience. And experience can mean a lot of different things. We're talking about being experienced, and we're talking about having new experiences. When you have an experience at something, it means that there is a neural structure forming and you're working on the right path. But new experiences, when you try something that you've never tried before, there's going to be a reaction in your mind that never happened before. A very quick example that I'm not sure if you can relate to it or not, but recently there's this huge trend on slime. Everybody, kids all around the world, they want to buy slime. They want to make slime. All the YouTube videos out there with millions and millions of views, just people holding slime, doing shapes, squeezing it and making funny noise out of it. And everybody's saying how satisfying it is and how they can just play with it for hours and they would just feel the stress going away. Now, why didn't they do this 5 years ago? Well, the reason why is because 5 years ago, people didn't try it that much. There wasn't a big enough number of experiences for it to trend. But those people who actually tried it, if you've never tried slime before, go grab one, buy one, and when you touch it for the first time, when you squeeze it for the first time, you're going to feel something different. You're going to feel something that you've never, ever felt before. And this is where the new experience is. Now here's how you would wire your brain into making it a habit. If every single time you feel anxious, you would get this slime and just squish it and play with it as much as you want until you feel that you don't feel anxious anymore, you don't feel anxiety anymore, your mind will start linking these two together. They will start linking the neural networks responsible for stress with the neural networks that deals with stress relief and all the neurons that were triggered when you touched the slime, and then through repetition, you felt relief. And now you have people spending hundreds of dollars over slime. I saw a slime kit that is worth $145. This is where you know that it's not just a trend anymore. It's becoming an actual experience. It's becoming something that is embedded in the human mind and the children's mind. After realizing these concepts, I was majoring in marketing at the University of Ottawa, and then I decided to take a minor in psychology to understand how I can link experiences to marketing. If I can use my marketing to make people feel new experiences that has a positive outcome and then they want to repeat it, they would be stuck in a loop through the concept, of course, of neuroplasticity. It becomes wired in their brain and then sales would boom up. But of course, it's not that simple of a process. It takes years of learning to be able to understand just the basics and fundamentals of the relationship between marketing and psychology, let alone neuroplasticity. Now, we need to add one more thing. Experiences are not always equal. Some experiences would affect you way more than other experiences. If you get a group of children and you give them pencils that are worth $1, the cheapest pencils that you can find, and they write with them throughout a few months. And then you take all these cheap pencils and you give them really nice, expensive pencils. Most probably, they have the tendency to write with better handwriting. The new pencil for them is a new experience. Knowing that they need to fix their handwriting, now they have the chance. So when they start writing with this new pencil and they start writing well, when they get positive responses from their family, friends, and peers, they will keep doing this behavior and they will keep repeating this behavior. And if they do it long enough, even when they switch to the old pencil, their handwriting is still nice. But if they don't do it long enough, getting back the old pencil, they will not have the same handwriting as they had when they were using the more expensive pencils. And this huge change have very little emotional experience involved in it. Now let's take another example. You had this pencil that you've been writing with for a long time, but there's a pencil at the bookstore that you've seen that's a little bit expensive, but you really, really want it. You love this pencil and you would do anything in the world to have it. And then your dad notices that you have really bad handwriting. He goes and buys the pencil for you and he says, look, this is your gift, but you're gonna promise me that you're gonna have better handwriting, that you're gonna write better and practice your handwriting. In both examples that I previously mentioned, you got a new expensive pencil, and in both cases, your handwriting got better. But in the second example, the emotional experience is much better. There are a lot more emotions involved because first you really wanted this pencil, and then you got it, and then it was a gift from your father, and then your father wants what's good for you, and then you accept it, and you feel like you're taking responsibility. And these are all emotional factors that would enhance the emotional experience. And of course, eventually it will strengthen and it will make it way faster for neurons to create connections between each other. And this moves us to peak emotional experiences. Sometimes an experience can have such a huge emotional impact that only one experience would rewire your brain. I'll take a very simple example. Your first love. When people fall in love for the first time, it always ends. It's very rarely does it happen that, it does happen, but rarely, that two people fall in love with each other and it was the first time they ever fall in love and they end up spending the rest of their lives together. Most first-time lovers will end up breaking up after a while. Now, the breakup always has emotional impact on the partners. In some instances, both of them decide that it's not working out and they need to try some different things and they just agree that it needs to end and they stay friends. Then the emotional experience that they had was a really positive one. They fell in love and it was nice, and then they broke up. They agreed that it's time for them to move on and try new things, and that's where it ended. And for them, it's going to be wired in their brain that love is something not that hard to handle. It doesn't destroy you emotionally and make you go through depressive phases and whatever. But you have another couple who, when they broke up, the guy didn't want to break up and the girl broke up with him because maybe she wanted to date another guy who has more money. And this is an example that is very relative to our world today. Now, to make the example a bit more interactive, let's give them names. We'll say we have Michelle and Michael who are dating, and then Michelle wants to break up with Michael because Jason wants to date her and he has more money. But Michael doesn't want to break up with Michelle, and he tries as much as he can, as hard as he can, to convince her to stay with him. He cried. He started mentioning old experiences and memories to try to get these feelings of sympathy He got mad and he punched the wall and he drove recklessly. Nothing worked, and he just couldn't accept the fact that he lost her to another guy, to Jason. And then he thinks about committing suicide. He gets depressed, and eventually, hopefully, he gets over it. But this was a peak emotional experience. This experience had a lot of emotions charged, and it hit him in the face. Now for him, love is not just a pleasant thing, but every time he thinks about love, he will also think about the breakup that he went through, all the experiences that he went through. Just because of one single experience, one single relationship, his brain became wired and had a certain translation when it comes to the idea of relationships and love. And moreover, he will also compare himself to Jason, and he will think that if only I had money. And then his brain becomes wired that in order for me to get love, I need to give money. I had a high school teacher who was a teacher, a professor, and a lawyer in the same time. And he was once telling us his story in class when we were first meeting him. And apparently there was a girl who he fell in love with, and she fell in love with him as well. He went to her father because he wanted to marry her, but her father refused and said, "You don't have enough money to take care of my daughter." He tried talking to the potential wife, and she said she can't do anything if her father refuses. She doesn't want to let her father down. And what did he do? He worked. He stopped everything. This had such a huge emotional impact on him that he blocked everything, and his mind became wired towards one thing and one thing only: working and making money. Even after he made money and he got married and he got over the experience, he doesn't think about this every single night and cry anymore, but it became wired in his mind. He can't stop working. He can't stop thinking about making more money because one peak emotional experience had this impact on him. Moving on, we're going to talk about first-time experiences. I'm pretty sure you heard this question before, or you asked this question before. How was your first kiss? See, most people don't remember their second kiss, or their third kiss, or their fourth kiss. They always remember their first kiss. They always remember their first time experiences. In the example that we gave before, it was not just a peak emotional experience, but it was a first time experience as well. Some people might date a few times and have feelings towards someone, and then after 3-4 people, they would date someone, and then trouble would happen and they would have the peak emotional experience, but it wasn't their first time experience. In this scenario, the peak emotional experience would overcome the effects of the first time experience. It would neglect it, and it would act in an inhibitive way where the first time experience is not even relevant anymore. What's relevant is the experience and the wiring that you got through this peak emotional experience. But there's a certain power to first time experiences, and it's the perception that we have. If you're trying to smoke for the first time and you like it, you're going to smoke again. But if you smoke for the first time and you don't like the taste and it makes you cough and you felt like you want to vomit, you're not going to smoke again. I remember when a couple of my Arab friends wanted me to try the shisha, and we went to the restaurant and I tried it, and I kept hitting it for like half an hour, and then I ended up vomiting. I vomited like 3-4 times, and I never tried it again. I never came close to it, even though I had a lot of different instances where people invited me to come and take shisha with them, and I said absolutely not, never again. Now, a lot of people, they want to try new things because, they have this concept of you only live once, and they want to try different things in life. Even though there are some things that might hurt them, and they know that these things are not good for them, but they want to try it for the sake of experience and just trying it and seeing how it feels. That's how most people get addicted to drugs. That's how most people get addicted to smoking cigarettes. That's how most people get addicted to using drugs. And of course, it doesn't just stop there. Researchers found that first-time experiences also, when you first have sex, the position that you start with that gave you a lot of pleasure, usually this will be one of your favorite positions throughout your life because that was your first time experience and it has such a huge emotional experience on you. That was all this dopamine rush and all these feelings that you had in your body, all the sexual feelings and the arousement. Now, mixing the two previous concepts together, when you have a first time experience, that is a peak emotional experience. That's an experience that's definitely gonna leave a long-lasting effect and that did a certain rewiring in your brain. If you go for the first time to visit a zoo, and while you're there, you're walking through cages, let's say, hypothetically, there is a snake that bit you. And then you were rushed to the hospital, and then there was huge medical procedures to get the venom out and all of that, and you risked dying. See, at this point, of course, you will have a fear of snakes, and that's for sure. But not just that. You will also feel discomfort and anxious every time you get close to any kind of zoo. Even though the peak emotional experience was caused by the snake and now you have fear against the snakes, it was your first time experience in a zoo and it was all interconnected, and now you hate snakes and you hate zoos as well because of the first time high peak emotional experience. Now, moving on to something that we call the new old experiences. Sometimes you try something as a kid or at a certain age and you don't like it, and you experience it again at a later age and you actually like it. I'm gonna give you a really silly example about myself. When I first tried the burger from McDonald's, I was a kid. I did not like it at all. I thought it was disgusting and I only ate nuggets. But then as I grew up, 4 or 5 years later, my brother suggests that I should try a burger. And I said, you know what? It's been a long time. I grew up. Why not? And I tried it and I absolutely loved it. Different experiences can have different impacts in different times. So if at a certain point in your life, this experience have a specific impact, maybe in another point in your life, the same experience can have an absolutely different impact. Finally, repetitive experiences, even if they're not emotionally charged, tend to eventually become a habit and a lifestyle and becomes wired in your brain. And all of these experiences, all the different examples and types that we talked about are related to these 4 main factors: habits, memory, learning, and behavior. Habits is when the behavior becomes automatic. The behavior starts with a learning process. You learn how the behavior happens and then you apply it. It becomes a behavior. A certain set of learnings that you did created this behavior. And then through repetition, this behavior became a habit. Now, this habit brings you a certain pleasure. It gives you a reward that we're going to look at in the habit loop later on. And this habit loop, if the reward gives you a dopamine rush, it will be stuck in your memory that this behavior that I learned will give me this certain reward. And then what will happen is it will be wired in your brain and it will become a habit and a lifestyle. And it all began with one experience or a set of experiences that taught you something that resulted in a certain behavior. The behavior became a habit because of the memories, involvement, and the reward center. Now, moving on, we're going to talk about a concept called randomized controlled trial. Basically, becoming aware of biased experiences and interpretations. When you grow up in a society that has always taught you that smoking is good, it makes you feel good, it makes you look manly. When you try a cigarette, you are going to have a biased opinion and you're going to like it even if you don't like it. When somebody tries a dish and they tell you you need to try it, it's the best thing I've ever tried in my life. And then you try it and you're like, it's not that good actually. And the question is why? Well, because each one of you has a different opinion. So, according to his biased experience, this was the best thing he's ever tried between all the different food that he tried in his life. But in your own experience, all the foods that you tried in your life, this was not one of the best. In most cases, all the experiences that we have in our lives, whether they're new or they're not, we already have a certain mental interpretations when it comes to these experiences. And sometimes these biased opinions can actually make you avoid getting into experiences that in the long run are beneficial for you. People who grow up in families where the parents and the siblings never went to school, and the father always says that schooling is not important and the school system is corrupt and it will only get you into student debts and it will never teach you anything. You will not even consider going to school because you think that it's a complete waste of time. So you don't even get to the experience because of your biased opinion. So if you stop looking at things, at experiences in terms of what other people told you and what you interpreted based on that, and you just try the experience to see how you are honestly and genuinely gonna feel about it, there's gonna be a huge difference in your life. Lastly, we're gonna talk about 5 last concepts. First is mental stimulation. Keeping yourself in a constant mental stimulation and brain stimulation pattern is always good to ensure neuroplasticity. The more mental stimulation you experience, the more links will happen between neurons and the more neural chains and networks you will have. And one of the things that kill the mental stimulation is watching television. Watching TV, which of course includes watching Netflix and watching YouTube, absolutely blocks your mental stimulation. Every single time you're watching a show, you're watching TV, you're watching YouTube, your mind is not being stimulated. Your mind just stops and you're just watching without thinking about anything. Moreover, the Mediterranean diet was found to help a lot with neuroplasticity. Social network and social networking platforms, as we talked about them before, they are absolutely detrimental. And lastly, different brains adapt differently. Every brain has different experiences, have different structures, have different opinions and interpretations, and each and every brain will adapt to situations in a different way. And now, as we come to the end of this lecture, I just want you guys to know that all of these principles, basics, and fundamentals that we talked about right now are crucial to know. When you know these things, you'll have way better understanding of how your brain works and how things gets wired, and of course, then you're going to learn how neuroplasticity actually works. Now, after going through the scientific approach of neuroplasticity and learning what neuroplasticity is, and now going into fundamentals to understand how things get wired in your brain, how society, environment, and all the different types of experiences can affect neuroplasticity and can affect the brain stimulation, and how other factors, as we said, such as your experience, your biased opinion and interpretation, the level of mental stimulation that you're in, all the things that you're doing that are blocking this mental stimulation. There's a certain diet, and we're going to talk about it more later, that contains brain foods. Food that can actually help you increase your brain capacity and energy and increase the brain cells in general. Social networking platforms that are a big obstacle in front of you when it comes to neuroplasticity. And eventually understanding that it doesn't all work under one general rule. Different brains adapt differently to different situations and different experiences. And through introspection, you'll be able to know how your brain is adapting to the different situations and different experiences. And this is the only way to learn and grow above where you are right now.